I think the capabilities of AI just surprised a lot of people. We didn't have computers that could pass the Turing test, that could talk to you like a human, and then one day we did. We're talking about a truly world-changing event. And so it's easy to understand the interest of policymakers, but you're not going to be able to control this technology through top-down policy.
AI is the best technology humans have ever created, and could be the most dangerous technology humans have ever created. Because we don't have brakes for our car, but rather than stop and figure out how do we build brakes, we're just racing as fast as we can and saying, well, by the time we need those brakes, somebody will have figured out how to build them and put them onto the car.
Artificial intelligence. It feels like that's all we hear about these days, and for good reason. AI is advancing at an unprecedented pace, transforming industries and reshaping how we interact with information and technology. But as AI becomes more widespread, so do the challenges it raises. Biased systems, fake or stolen content, environmental impacts, even the rise of AI-driven robots. These are just a few of the things that lawmakers and the public are concerned about. I'm Adam Thier, and in this episode, we'll explore the path that led to today's regulatory landscape and hear from experts about what regulation should or could look like in the future. Because as always, the choices we make now will help shape our world for decades to come. To understand what's really at stake with AI, I spoke not only with legal scholars, but with people who work with AI every day, whose technologies and livelihoods are directly shaped by evolving policy. That journey led me to Boston, home of Boston Dynamics, one of the world's leading robotics companies and a major real-world user of AI.
That's
so
amazing.
That's the benefit of the sort of AI-powered robot technology.
Right, incredible.
Yeah.
It's always exciting to me as someone who talks and writes about public policy in Washington to actually go out into the field and talk to real-world innovators about the challenges they face technologically, economically, and then also legally. Boston Dynamics specializes in creating robots that are agile and precise enough to navigate complex environments. AI is integral to these capabilities. Brendan Schulman is the Vice President of Policy and Legal Affairs at Boston Dynamics. He's known for his leadership in drone regulation during his time at DJI, where he served as Vice President of Policy. That experience is especially relevant now, as Boston Dynamics faces similar challenges around the safe, ethical, and effective deployment of AI-powered robots in real-world environments.
How do your experiences with drone regulations inform your perspectives on robotics policy?
I see a lot of similarities between the drone policy regulations and robots, particularly when it comes to social acceptance and governmental understanding of what the technology is. In the drone space, you had a lot of concerns about surveillance and spying and physical threats to airspace and aviation. A lot of those fears were just based on ignorance. Very similarly with AI and robotics, mostly because we've seen Terminator, Black Mirror, those kinds of shows that often are portraying the robots as enemies of humanity. And so you've got that same point of origin for some of the policy ideas out there. And you can talk about fear and have an emotional response, but focusing in on the facts and, if possible, the data is really important.
As Brendan points out, effective policy begins with understanding the technology, what it does, what it doesn't do, and how it compares to the systems we already rely on. When I spoke with Harvard Law professor Lawrence Lessig, a longtime expert on tech policy, he agreed, but he warned that the real-world risks of AI are serious enough that some kind of regulation, even during these early stages, is crucial.
Many people talk about the risks as if the thing we're worried about is Terminator. But that seems to me just to misunderstand the range of risks that we're talking about here, whether it's bio risks or economic risks. In the models which you lose control of and they engage in the economic transactions in a way that cause great harm in the economic context. And again, what I thought the right response to that was just to say, make sure you have a process for minimizing the chance of these types of harms. But my belief is we're not going to have any real AI regulation until we have our first great catastrophe, the kind of 3 Mile Island event, or hopefully not Chernobyl event, but the point is something that really wakes people up to the potential harm here. And that's too bad, because I think that there's lots of gain to be produced by having a more robust infrastructure of safety and concern here.
One thing quickly became clear. AI is advancing at a rapid pace, and lawmakers have little precedent to guide their efforts to regulate it. This lack of precedent is especially evident in the one model policymakers do tend to rely on, rightly or wrongly, the internet.
Just what is this main artery of the information superhighway?
It will replace the yellow pages as we know it today.
What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate with it.
It's a new form of communication. It's obviously only growing. If you're not up on the net today, you're just not part of the future, period.
AI is fundamentally built on the internet. It simply couldn't function without it. Yet the internet itself is something lawmakers have long struggled to regulate effectively. And for better or for worse, the early internet operated with very little oversight. Dean Ball, formerly a research fellow at the Mercatus Center, agrees that AI needs regulation. But he contends that regulating something you don't fully understand does little more than hamper its development and growth.
The AI revolution would be literally impossible without the internet, because the only reason it works is because you have all of this data that was generated at a scale, orders of magnitude larger than the entire corpus of human written work before, the 90s. And now with AI, there's this very common line you hear among people in the policymaking community. They'll say something like, well, we don't want to let this one get away from us, like we let the internet get away from us. And I view that as like the most profound misunderstanding of the history of American tech regulation, because the way that we regulated the internet enabled the internet to flourish, and it enabled trillions of dollars in economic value to be created. And so saying we don't want to let this one get away from us, I think what it means is policymakers are upset that the internet's not under their control in more ways. And I think that ultimately says more about their mentality than it says about the social problems of the internet.
As the internet was developing, copyright lawyers were trying to impose all sorts of restrictions on the ability of people to use the technology and innovate with the technology. And the result was pretty aggressive regulation of the internet. And that had a profound effect on innovation. But that's not to say that we should have no regulation. I think we would have had a much more vibrant internet had we've been more aggressive in regulating tech companies like Amazon and Google, because everybody is seeing the consequence of the power of these companies over a wide range of social life. It's the same in the context of AI.
So in the early years of the drone industry, there was an outright prohibition from the federal government which said that you cannot put the technology to use until we've created the rules for commercial operation, which is sort of backwards from a lot of different regulatory frameworks that we tend to have in the United States. But I think it's really important to take a risk-based approach to addressing challenges. And there are different issues that compel different approaches. So policies that would address bias, misinformation, intellectual property are different from those that might address physical safety, which is where I think, if anywhere, the policy should address AI.
We think this technology has very significant implications for geopolitical competitiveness, et cetera, but state governments are racing ahead with hundreds of bills that will be used to pressure companies out of doing all sorts of things. And I think that they will hinder America's ability to adopt AI.
The most significant of these state efforts to govern AI was a controversial, high-profile California bill known as Senate Bill 1047.
The bill would place requirements on AI companies to take certain security measures.
The bill is pretty simple and makes sure that giant AI companies like OpenAI, Meta, and Google actually have to test their systems for dangerous capabilities like taking down the electrical grid or enabling a pandemic. Pretty basic stuff.
This bill is drafted to attack underlying model researchers, scientists, and developers. This is an incredibly dangerous piece of well-intentioned but incredibly misguided regulation.
Senate Bill 1047 took aim at the most powerful AI systems, known as frontier models. These massive complex models could, in the wrong hands, be used to do things like generate dangerous code, assist in creating bioweapons, or even act in ways their developers can't fully predict. Critics have argued that the bill would have effectively strangled innovation by raising development costs and concentrating power among major tech companies. Some warned it could push AI research out of California or the US entirely. Ultimately, California never got to find out. Although the bill passed the State House and the Senate, when it arrived on Governor Gavin Newsom's desk, he vetoed it. But it remains an important case for understanding the complexities of AI regulation and the challenges lawmakers face when crafting such policies.
SB 1047 would require developers to have to do safety mitigations on their models to avoid harms of greater than $500 million and basically be exposed to negligence liability if their model was used in an attack. But the problems with the bill were manyfold. One of them, in my view, was that I thought the bill was expanding sort of much broader negligence liability, because it didn't say that you're protected below $500 million of harm. It just says that you have to mitigate for above that. Maybe in a world where you have an algorithm that's trained to do one very specific thing, maybe that can make some sense. But when you're talking about a language model that you can just fire up on your laptop and use for literally thousands of different things, millions of different things, it seems like a quite incoherent policy approach. Very few people in the tech community understood this bill, and I don't think it's something that the corporations are asking for. I don't think it's something that the people are asking for.
A year before SB 1047 appeared, you had all the leaders of these AI companies appearing in Washington saying, you've got to regulate us, because this is a very dangerous technology and we need sensible regulation here to make sure harm doesn't come from what we're producing. Yet the first time sensible regulation was stood up, in my view at least, all but one of the major AI companies were pretty hostile to it. And what's striking about the SB 1047 is that it was targeted just at the large competitors. It was really about making sure that the most powerful frontier models had certain restrictions that would at least give us some confidence that they were not going to present extraordinary risks.
SB 1047 highlights the core challenge of AI regulation: how to balance innovation with the need to manage risk. It also shines a spotlight on the widening gap between state and federal efforts. So where does that leave the United States? While the US has always been a global tech leader, it now risks falling behind in both AI innovation and regulation. China is investing heavily in AI research and infrastructure to dominate the global marketplace, while Europe has already enacted comprehensive laws like the AI Act, setting international benchmarks for ethical AI use. In contrast, the US lacks both consistent federal legislation and a stable regulatory vision, with priorities shifting from one administration to the next.
The Biden administration's executive order on AI was one of the longest executive orders in American history. And every single one of those 100+ pages was telling agencies to do various things. And one of the things that came out was the US AI Safety Institute. So it joins an international consortium of other AI safety institutes. Korea, the European Union kind of has one, the UK has one, even Kenya. And the ostensible purpose of these entities is to evaluate frontier AI models for potential catastrophic risks that only the government can test for. I think that seems like a perfectly reasonable government function. The question, though, of whether it should be regulatory, I think, is definitely not. Once it becomes regulatory, it loses a lot of that credibility, and it becomes subject to all kinds of negative outcomes like regulatory capture and whatnot. But ultimately, Trump rescinded the Biden executive order, and they made ensuring American dominance in artificial intelligence basically the headline priority. And they've also said, yes, this is a national security concern for us. So there's a lot of work in deleting, rewriting, etc., that has to be done.
Just like we have bond rating agencies, you could imagine people running their work through certified AI safety institutes, which have an infrastructure that meets a kind of minimum. And the idea of competitive safety institutes, that might be the ideal way to get us the smart safety review at that type of level. But I don't think we actually have an agency that has that type of perspective. And so this is why we need to think about a kind of agency that could be almost an expert for the rest of the government, the way that Justice Department is the law expert for the rest of government. So recognizing there's zero chance of such an agency being established in the current climate of the dysfunction of Washington, I do think it would make sense to imagine moving to a space where we pull a bunch of this technology regulation into a more coherent regulatory structure that could do it in a more sensible way. But it's not going to be anytime soon that we have a well-functioning regulatory infrastructure. Well, if we don't have that, should we do nothing? I think that just depends on what you think the risk is.
Technological innovation is really the only robust and durable way that we've found through the centuries to improve the overall human lot in life. Fundamentally, the way that we become wealthier and more prosperous as a species is through increased productivity.
We've seen other countries that have a national strategy for AI and robotics, including China, Singapore, Germany, Australia most recently. And it's very clear that if you have a central government function or office or official who's thinking about how to put robots and AI to use, how to address job displacement concern or education and training, and also looking for industries that could benefit, those can really make the difference. I've had great conversations with folks who understand and they see that.
The risks of AI are, from the perspective of some people, catastrophic risks. Very serious concerns about runaway technologies or technologies that empower a wide range of actors, including very bad actors, to use the power of AI to achieve very bad things. So we should at least be open to thinking about sensible regulation to preserve values that we might think important.
The debate over how to govern AI is no longer theoretical. It is unfolding in real time across legislatures, boardrooms, labs, and living rooms. Whether the answers come from California, Washington, Brussels, or somewhere entirely unexpected, one thing is certain: the choices we make today will define not just the future of AI, but the future we all share.